Hello, my name's David Roche. I'm a Welsh composer based in Cambridge, and I'm going to talk a little about my piece Practice Patience for Psappha. It's an exhilarating, intense piece for chamber ensemble and is being performed on the 27th of May 2021. The standard build of a rock band is 2 guitars, bass, drums and a vocalist. 1 guitar panned hard left, 1 guitar panned hard right. This helps keep everything clear in the stereo field. You will often hear guitars playing in harmony with an individual line in each speaker. Think of Iron Maiden's The Trooper, or, as with the on-screen example, you'll hear a consistently repeated riff with some chords underneath it. A lot of these textures are pretty simple to describe, but they're hard to execute with impact or without being cheesy. A lot of modern metal bands have expanded on these well-worn textures too. Everything's becoming a bit more futuristic and exciting now. In The Way the News Goes by Periphery, the basic textures I previously described have been developed dramatically. Standard power chords now have added notes and the riffs are way more acrobatic, with what we might describe as extended techniques. No electric guitars would call them this though. I love how gymnastic the lines are, and I love how straightforward the chords are. For all the fireworks in this piece, I feel that the real focus is on how cool or engaging the material is. The technicality is a secondary issue. The writing is direct and to the point, even though it's fancy in its own way. I also love the directness of thought expressed by the band. Mark Holcomb, one of Periphery's 3 guitarists, just takes a power chord, moves it around the fretboard and peppers in a few notes where he can. He talks about this in a great interview linked in the description too. So, how does this relate to my music? Well, I use these textures all over Practice Patience, and it's rooted in the rock and metal I grew up with. My background is in groovy, metronomic rock and metal music, and what I love most about this music is the focus on the hook or the main idea. If it doesn't sound right to the composer, then it goes in the bin. It's all about feel, you've got to love it. In my own music, I try to emulate this spirit and keep things ultra direct. Repetition is utterly fundamental to what I write, and I especially love long lines of quavers repeated over and over. I think there's something magical in picking the right group of constant quavers. They don't all feel the same, and no matter how many times I write a piece using this kind of idea, they all feel different. I also like describing music as magical. Unsuk Chin says that music should feel like magic, and I don't think I'm quoting her in the right context here, but it still speaks to me, so I'm going to take it. Anyway, the following example is the main idea from Practice Patience. It's a 2-bar unit, alongside a few pieces that I've recently composed. The initiating material seems similar, but the results are so different. I associate the directness of rock and pop music with the music I grew up learning and playing in South Wales. There was a huge music scene in my county when I was a teenager, and all I did was play guitar and write music. I also practiced to a metronome for hours a day. So the rock and metal repertoire is at my core. It's totally fundamental to my engagement with music. There was also something of a sense of desperate determination in a lot of the local Welsh music that I grew up with. There were tons of local bands that had this kind of feel, but I think the real reference point for this is The Holy Bible by the Manic Street Preachers. The Manics were from the next town over from my hometown. My first job was in a guitar shop in the place that they came from. And much of what they sing about relates to the deprivation, dissatisfaction and deindustrialisation of South Wales. I did an article about how I think this is the best Welsh album of all time too, so make sure you check that out. It's in the description. The ideas in the Holy Bible definitely spoke to me as a teenager, and they still speak to me now. It's a little hard to understand unless you are from the area, but this kind of music gave a lot of people, myself included, a focus and a dream in some way that was often really miserable. So all of these feelings and ideas are rolled into the riffy music that I love playing to make a big ball of identity and aggression. I was thinking of all of this when I went into writing Practice Patience, and I really think you can hear it. There's a strong sense of drive and determination throughout the piece. This is the 3rd piece I've been lucky enough to write for Psappha. My 10-Acre Riots, which I wrote for Psappha's Composing for Piano scheme, was developed on sketches I worked on with Richard Casey, who was a player for Psappha, which I didn't realise at the time. 10-Acre Riots basically led to my entire career as a composer. It has featured on more or less every application for every major piece that I have ever been commissioned to write. It's at the foundation of a huge number of my compositions. The second piece I worked on for Psappha was a commission for Hear Me Now in conjunction with the Whitworth Gallery and Psappha in Manchester. it was a piece for toy piano and percussion, and this was a really important piece for me too. It had lots of rhythmic, technical issues to grapple with. Every one of these pieces was composed in a workshop setting with the musicians from Psappha. They've continually given me the space to work on my music as fully as possible. They're ultra generous with their time and effort. Practice Patience, which was also the inaugural Larner Walker Commission for Psappha, was a hard piece to write. I wanted every note to be fantastic all the way through. It's such a rookie error to put this much pressure on yourself, and it made everything quite tough. I ended up rewriting the whole thing 4 or 5 times, fully. I'd done about 50 minutes of music by the end of the year. Some of the pieces that started out as sketches for Practice Patience ended up winning prizes in their own right. But this is all irrelevant. It had to be right to me. I'm definitely a big believer in the when it's right mentality, and I stand by my choice to keep working on the piece until it was where I felt it should be. I spend a lot of time trying to ignore every impulse based on a pressure about how something should be. There are always some technical ideas that I think will yield positive results, but divorced from the structure of a piece, they're basically meaningless to me. After hearing a striking musical idea, what compels me is the journey of a composition. I think structure is the place where we get to exert our musical identities most aggressively and clearly. I keep the door open to everything, believing there's no pride in ignorance, but also making sure that I don't prioritise theoretical and technical approaches to music. I did for a long time, and it's not for me. I think it's all in the listening, intuition and feel. Another challenge of this piece came from the fact that I've spent a long time writing orchestral music and music for soloists, but much less in between. I think my lack of familiarity with chamber ensembles was also a large reason behind the rewriting. Writing over and over and over and over gave me the chance to really immerse myself in musical ideas, understand the nature of what I was trying to compose, and experiment. I was very fortunate to be able to have 2 workshops on this piece with Psappha. As I said, they're committed to working with musicians to make the best pieces possible. The first of these was online, the second was face-to-face after a year of not hearing any live music at all, which was actually amazing. I also forget to mention that this was all happening during a pandemic. How wild is that? During the process of composition, many of the questions I raised to myself were quite straightforward. How do you balance percussion in an ensemble? Will this texture work? Will this instrument speak in this register? They seem like simple questions, but they're important and necessary, and I only care about what makes the piece better. No question is stupid or naive if it needs an answer. Denying ourselves the chance to ask basic questions deprives us of answers to fundamental musical questions, or questions that are fundamental to us. I think once you hear the music in person, you have to accept the reality of it and adjust everything based on that. It is what it is, make it work. Psappha have been an incredibly supportive ensemble and have helped me turn my compositions into an actual career. I'm incredibly excited to hear this piece. I pushed myself as much as possible and I hope you enjoy it. Details of the performance are in the description. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.